Hey everybody, it's Karina with Karina Loves to Plan. Welcome back to my channel. So it is time for the last installment of 30 Inks 30 Days for days 24 through 30. Let's get started. Day 24 is Sailor Tenterias Blue Corn, and I have to say all of the inks I've tried from Sailor Tenterias have been beautiful colors. They've got great flow, and they work really well in the pens that I have tried them in. So I've placed a drop here in the grid in my B6 Galen leather notebook and swirled it around with the lid of my ink sample vial, and I have filled my Sailor Pro Gear in the white rose gold, and this has a 21 karat rose gold nib, and oh boy, the two together, it's a very smooth and wet experience. That's all I have to say. Like, look how beautiful this purple ink is. And I'm writing it again in my B6 Galen leather notebook. I'm keeping track, like I'm keeping track of a currently inked. And what I'm going to say is that I am really enjoying the experience of using all these pens and all these inks in 3 different places, in the B6 Galen leather notebook, and here in my A5 or my Hobonichi cousin, where I get to do different type of swatching but also journal as well. And I'm so glad to hear of so many of you who are using the sandwich bag swatching method. There are so many ways that you can certainly swatch an ink, but I find this one almost the most simple. Like, you don't need to have a paintbrush. If you have a sandwich bag at home, you can do this and you can get such great effect on your paper. It brings out the shading and it can bring out some shimmer and sheen as well. So here I am writing my to-do list in my Hobonichi cousin. And again, I've really enjoyed the process of being able to write with this pen and ink combination for a whole day in 3 different places, in my B6 Galen leather notebook. Oh, made a mistake. In my Hobonichi cousin here, and again in my Rhodia notebook where I'm transcribing Anne of Green Gables. The opportunity to write in 3 different places and to use the ink in 3 different places has just made 30 Inks 30 Days really fulfilling for me, because I've been able to really use the pen and ink pairing. So here I am putting a few imperfect organic swirls into my Rhodia notebook. And again, I'm really liking dedicating 2 pages to each ink and pen, and I've actually gotten quite far ahead in Anne of Green Gables because of 30 Inks 30 Days. What I do have to say though about the Rhodia paper is that it does feel, with certain inks anyway, makes the ink and pen combination feel drier. Like, for some reason, there's something that prevents the ink from coming out of the pen. I don't know what it is, but with some inks it just feels drier, like I have to push harder on the pen and ink, and it does feel that way with this. It's still a very smooth experience with this paper, but a little drier. And you can see the way that this looks. Like, I am loving this, but again, it's a little bit of an off-white color, so it is a different experience to the Tomoe River paper, but very beautiful and lovely pen and ink combination. Day 25 is Ferris Wheel Press Buttered Popcorn, and this is one I've had for a while, and I've actually used in a few fountain pen ink paintings. So just placing a little drop there and swirling it with the ink sample vial lid. I actually really like this method because it is easy to clean. Oop, got a little dot there. And then I'm using my Pelikan M400 in the white tortoise, and the 2 together actually work really well. And this is quite an orangey yellow, as you can see there, but it shades beautifully. The thing with yellow though is that unless it is the exact right shade of yellow, most of them are going to be very hard to read. And that's what I found with this particular ink, was that when I was writing with it, it was hard to see what I had just written. But then when it dried, it did dry a little bit darker. However, me personally, if I can't see what I'm writing while I'm writing it, it's not a great experience for me. But when I swatch it like this with the sandwich bag on my Hobonichi cousin, the colors, well, there's really only two colors, like yellow and orange, but the shading in it is fantastic. And I did like writing with it in terms of its smoothness and the flow, but the legibility, not the greatest. And then when I'm gonna go ahead and write in it in the Rhodia notebook, again, with the Rhodia notebook, it felt drier. It didn't feel like the ink was coming out as much as it would have on the Tomoe River paper. So here I am adding a few drops then to the Rhodia notebook and using my ink vials to swirl it around a bit. And you can see here that the color actually looks very similar on both papers. But again, the experience of writing with this one on the Rhodia, not my favorite pen, ink, and paper combination. But again, still fun to be able to write with all of these and use this fun ink. Not something that I would personally buy again, but this has been great with fountain pen ink paintings. Day 26 is Jacques Herbin Emerald de Chivor, and this one was when I got in, I think it was a random sample pack that I got at Wonder Pens, and was one that I'd been wanting to try for a while, but just was never motivated to put it in my cart. And I'm really glad that I did get this as a sample and did try it. Now, I thought this was going to be a lot more teal, but it looks more blue to me in this swatch. And I filled my Hogtown pens on the edge of Oopsie pen with this, and I wasn't sure how it would work with the extra fine Yovo nib, but oh my gosh, look at that shimmer and look at that sheen. I can tell why so many people love this ink. So then here I am putting it into my B6 Galen leather book, and at first the writing wasn't great. It felt like it was dry, it wasn't coming out well, but after a little bit of priming, this had such great ink flow coming out of the extra fine Yovo nib, and it showed off all of the sheening and all of the shimmer. Really great ink, actually. My only concern was, you know, it's such a bold, and I feel like pigmented ink, that it might be a little bit difficult to clean. And while I think this would be great, you know, to use like during the holiday season, it's not one that I would pick up regularly. Now, I am keeping this sample to use later on in the year, because I think we should all try a little sample of Emerald de Chivor, because I think it's one of the original shimmer inks. And look at that shimmer. I mean, yes, there is some Ferris wheel press buttered popcorn shadowing through, but I think the effect of the two together are actually great design and great artistic piece, if I do say so myself, and even though it was completely accidental. So writing with it actually on the Tomoe River paper was a really, really good experience. I didn't really experience too many hard starts. The ink flow was wetter than average, and there wasn't any clogging with the shimmer. The only thing was that when I did finally clean this pen, it took a little bit of pen flush to really get the ink and the shimmer and all of that out of the feed. Otherwise though, I really liked the way that this looked on the paper, and the Tomoe River paper really brings out all of these great qualities. The next paper that I'm going to do this in is the Rhodia paper, where I place 3 drops there, and then I am going to swirl it around with the ink sample vial. And with this method, it sometimes doesn't fully bring out the characteristics of an ink, but if you look here, you can see all of that gold shimmer. You don't see as much of the red sheen on the Rhodia paper, but that shimmer is amazing. I really, really like the shimmer in this. And when I write with this on the Rhodia paper, no, not a lot of the sheen does come out, but the pen ink paper combination actually works really, really well together, which is why I will be keeping this sample and using it at a later date. Day 27 is Monteverde Purple Rain, and I normally have a great love of purple inks, but I felt like this one was kind of one-dimensional. It's a great color, but it felt too wet, so that it did feather on some other papers that I tried. And when I say other papers, when I tried to do some like flex nib or calligraphy writing with it, it did bleed through the Rhodia paper even. And when I did the swatching in this, you'll see that it did bleed through a little bit. But like I said, this purple feels a little one-dimensional to me. And it's not that I'm looking for it to be a chromo shader or anything. It just felt like it didn't even really have a lot of shading when I was doing the swatching. So you'll see here when I place a few drops on the Hobonichi Cousin and then I do my sandwich bag swatching technique, when it dries, it doesn't even look like it has lighter portions or darker portions. It just all looks to be the same level of pigment throughout. So I don't know if anybody else has experienced that with Monteverde Purple Rain, but it really wasn't my favorite ink out of the 30 inks, 30 days. Now saying that, writing with it was really nice. This is an extra fine Bach nib in my On a Whim Woodworks Cool Tone primary manipulation pen. And coming out of this pen, the ink flow was a little wetter than average, which is just where I like it, and very smooth with the Tomoe River paper. And actually, when I do end up writing with it on the Rhodia paper, it was also very smooth. I think the thing for me is that, like I said, this ink just felt a little bit one-dimensional, and you'll see it here shortly when I swatch it in the Rhodia notebook when I do my 3 imperfect organic circles. You can also see that it's already bleeding through a little bit and feathering a little bit on the Rhodia paper. And I don't know if I think I might show it to you, but if I don't, I apologize, but it did bleed through a little bit on the paper. And you can see there, even when it's drying, there isn't a lot of depth to it. It's just kind of that one tone, one note purple. And you can see there where I tried to do the Anne with the calligraphy pen just towards the left of the camera here. You can see where it bled through the page and feathered a bit. So I wouldn't recommend this in very, very wet, broad pens. But if you really like purple, this could be for you. But for me personally, you know, it's one that I'm happy to try once and let go of. Day 28 is Birmingham Penco Solar Storm, and this one was sent to me by Katie. She is a big fan of Birmingham Penco inks, and I'm so glad that she sent this to me because I don't have a lot of oranges, but I really liked this orange. It was kind of a lighter one that worked really well in my Esterbrook Esty Rainforest, and I liked the way that this shades, and I love the fact that this particular orange isn't a bright neon orange. It was lighter, more muted, and I really like that about this ink. At first when it went down, I wasn't sure if it was just too dry and that's why it was coming out a little bit lighter, but this was just the shade that it was, and it's still perfectly legible, as you can see here in my B6 Galen leather notebook. I really did like this ink, and it matched perfectly with my Esterbrook Esty Petrified Forest. Did I say rainforest earlier? I meant petrified forest. So I had very little of this sample, so I had to use it as sparingly as I could. So you see why there's very tiny drops on my Hobonichi cousin, and I'm trying to make the most of spreading it out with the sandwich bag. And so far it's working really well, and as you can see, once it dries, it is gorgeous. Although there is the Monteverde Purple rain kind of shadowing from the previous page, you can still really see how lovely this ink is. And I felt like with this extra fine nib on the Esterbrook Esty combined with the wetness of this ink, my writing looked amazing, if I do say so myself. But also on the Tomoe River paper, I just really enjoyed the overall experience. Now on the Rhodia paper, putting basically the last drops of the sample down, I finished this sample just by doing this page here and swirling it around with my ink sample vial. And you can see the way that it dries. The Rhodia paper doesn't show off the shading as much as Tomoe River paper, but for writing, it's a very smooth paper. It's got a little bit of a finish on it, or a coating on it, so I don't mind it too much. I bought this notebook because, well, I bought this notebook originally without really knowing the different types of paper, and I don't think I'll be buying another Rhodia notebook for transcribing in the future, but I really enjoyed this pen and ink pairing. I'm sad that I no longer have any of the Birmingham Penco Solar Storm, but I do recommend this if you guys want a more muted orange, because it's got great flow and the color is just beautiful. Then we have one of my newer samples, Wearingeul Stone Cutter's Song, and I don't know how to categorize this one, because is it gray? Is it brown? Is it mauve? And it's really hard to say. I think it could be any of those three. And to me, it looks like a brown mauve, but to other people it could look like that brown gray, which I think is so interesting with this ink. And I filled my Pilot E95S with this ink, and the two together, you know, I really like the 14K fine nib on the Pilot E95S, and I'm so glad that I put this ink in there because it even with a fine nib, it showed off the shading of this ink beautifully, and it wasn't dry. There were no hard starts or anything. The flow was actually just about average, or just a little bit over above average flow. So here I am adding a few drops to my Hobonichi cousin, and then sandwich paper bag. And this ink shades beautifully. And you can see, if you look really, really close here, there's a little bit of maybe like a tiny bit of a green in the pooling, and it reminds me of Sailor Kitsune Biori, and it's got that kind of brown, and I don't know how to categorize this ink. What would you guys categorize this as? Brown, gray, mauve, pink? I have absolutely no clue. All I know is it's beautiful, and I really loved using it on the Tomoe River paper. Now putting a few drops onto the Rhodia notebook for transcribing. Being able to compare the Rhodia notebook and the Tomoe River paper has been important for me in this process. But also it's been important for me to use up my notebook. I know that it's, for a lot of us, using up a notebook or even starting a notebook can be difficult. So I'm so glad I had the opportunity to really finish this notebook. But the ink looks more brown on this Rhodia paper. Or is that just me? I almost feel like this is kind of, it's one of those choose your own adventures type of thing. Choose what you feel like this ink will look like. Is it brown, gray, or mauve? And I feel like it is like that browny mauve, which I really, really like. So you can see up here when I'm writing with it, how well it flows out of this pen, and you'll be able to see the beautiful color. Finally, day 30, we have Robert Oster Australis tea, and this one was not what I expected it to be. When I purchased this from Van Ness, I was expecting a green similar to Diamine Meadow, but no. As you can see here, it's kind of a lighter lime yellowy green, and it matches perfectly with my Esterbrook Estie in the rainforest, but it's not an ink that I really enjoyed, because even just writing with it, I couldn't see what I was writing, first of all, and then I had to wait until it dried to make it legible. And when it dries, it's really pretty, but it's on the Tomoe River paper, it looks more green, but here it looks yellow. And I don't know if I like that, to be perfectly honest. But when I do the sandwich bag swatches, it brings out some of the darker qualities of the ink, and those darker green qualities look very similar to Diamine Meadow, but in the writing sample itself, it looks more yellow, and I'm not sure if I am a fan of that particular color. Now, if I were to use this in fountain pen ink paintings, I think it would look really, really beautiful. But in everyday writing, as you'll see me do here, like you can barely see me writing with it because it's too light and it just reflects the light in a weird way. And it's not great for my eyes. I mean, I'm in my 40s, guys. I need something that's easy to read. So let me know what you think about this particular ink. And a surprise with this ink as well is that it looks completely different in or on the Rhodia paper. It looks way more yellow on the Rhodia paper than it does on the Tomoe River paper. And No, the rodeo paper is not going to be the paper that I use on a day-to-day basis, but to see such a noticeable difference for me, I don't know. It's it's not an ink that I'm going to keep. Like, look here, the sample on the left is the Tomoe river paper, and then there is the rodeo paper. Look at the difference. Look at the huge difference between the two. But, you know, as the type A personality that I am, I'm going to go ahead and finish writing out or transcribing Anne of Green Gables here. So there we are, 30 inks, 30 days is officially done. And I've had actually a really great time this month being able to use all the pens and all the inks. 30 inks in 30 days is a really great way to use up what you've got. Highly, highly recommend it. So I'm gonna do just a quick flip through of my whole Hobonichi A5 cousin, and I'm going to do a flip through of my B6 Galen leather as well as a flip through of my Rhodia. So first and foremost, let's move that out of the way. In the currently page, I kept track of all the inks that I did for 3 inks 30 days. I think I'm going to rearrange the grid next time so that it's 5 by 6 or 6 by 5. And so there's day 1, day 2 and 3, and I really love the effect of the sandwich bag ink splatter. Then 4 and 5. I actually ended up really liking Twinkling Tea Party. Really like that ink. Day 6 and 7, Earl Grey Tea. I really like that orange, and that's what I'm keeping. And then day 7 is Roaring Patina Black, and I've already sent that off to somebody. Day 8 is Hisoku, which I really like, but there's not enough for me to keep. And then Wearingeul Jane Eyre, definitely keeping that. I love that one. And then day 10 is Birmingham Penco Pitted Nickel. There's like a drop left. Probably not even enough to do anything with. And then this one I believe was, got a fur now, it's Monteverde Birthday Cake, and I love that purple. And then Dominant Industry Autumn Forest. I ended up buying a full bottle of this, and it actually just arrived yesterday. So really looking forward to that. And then we have Kyujang Guk. And this one is Ama Iro. Pilot Roshizuku Ama Iro. Super bright. And then you have Land of Shangri-La by Ferris Press. You have Stroke of Midnight. And then Tachiya Ugu Isu Olive Green. I really like that green. And then Monteverde Pumpkin Cake, Teranishi Innocent Mauve, really love that one. And then this one is Dominant, I believe it's Dominant Industry Dawn. It was okay, not a fan of that one. And then Diamine Holly, very pretty, but way too much sheen for me. And then we have KWZ Brown Pink, pretty, but it's not brown and it's not pink, it's purple. I've given that one away already. And then we have Le Bon Hermes, which I really like that soft blue. And then we have Sailor Tenterias Blue Corn. All of the Sailor Tenterias inks that I've tried are fantastic. And then we have Ferris Wheel Press Buttered Popcorn, Jacques Herbin Emerald de Chivor. And then we have, what was this one again? And this was just a couple of days ago. That one was Monteverde Purple Rain. Very pretty, but I feel like it's a little bit one-dimensional. And then we have Birmingham Penco Solar Storm. This one is Wearingeul Stone Cutter Song. I really like that one. And then lastly, we have, I know this, Robert Oster Australis Tea. It looks different on the Rhodia paper versus the Tomoe River paper, but I loved having 1 whole month just dedicated to 30 inks, 30 days in my journal. Love that. And then in my B6 Galen leather notebook, so in the front here is a grid of all of the inks, and I'm glad I did it as a 6x5 grid. And then days 1 through 8, days 9 through 15, and I actually glued these 2 pages together. So this is not, you know, 1 page back to back, it's 2 pages glued together. Days 16 through 23 and days 24 through 30. Really love the way that this came together. And then the last place that I did 30 inks, 30 days was in my Rhodia notebook, where I am transcribing Anne of Green Gables. So I dedicated 2 pages for each pen and ink combination. Oh, really like Colorverse Alpha Aries. There we go. And it was really interesting to compare the Rhodia paper to the Tomoe River paper for the inks. I don't think I'll be purchasing another Rhodia notebook to continue transcribing. I think I'm going to continue in a Hobonichi notebook, actually. Really love the way that this looks. But I'm glad I gave myself 3 different places to do this ink study, basically, because then it allowed me to really get to know the pen and ink combination versus just swatching the ink and maybe writing a page. This allowed me to write it on different paper, but also use it in my journal. It gave me enough exposure to that pen and ink combination to really let me know how I would like it. And some of the inks, once I've tried them once, I was fine with letting them go, and other inks I felt like I needed more time to get to know them. So I'm really glad that I did this, because it allowed me to use up pretty much every single pen in my collection, and it also got me acquainted with quite a few inks. So I will definitely be doing this again come September. Oh, and I skipped a page. And there's day 28, day 29, and day 30. I'm going to show you something really interesting, because that looks so different in the Rhodia paper versus the Tomoe River paper. And the Tomoe River paper, it looks green. Rhodia paper, the Robert Oster Australis seed looks yellow. So hugely different. I didn't see that much of a difference in any of the other inks except for this one. All right, but that is it for 30 inks, 30 days for June. Thank you guys so much for following along with me on this journey. I will definitely, I say definitely, but I really hope to do this again in September, because I really truly enjoyed the process. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and have yourselves a great day.